The most dangerous people in any society aren't the violent ones, the corrupt ones, or the ones breaking laws. The most dangerous people are the ones who see clearly, the ones who sit in a room full of performances and recognize every single mask, the ones who hear the speech everyone's applauding and notice the contradiction no one else catches. Society doesn't fear intelligence because it's threatening in some abstract way. Society fears intelligence because intelligent people make the collective illusion harder to maintain. And the moment someone starts pulling at threads that hold the illusion together, the entire system turns against them. Carl Jung spent decades studying this dynamic, not intelligence in the way schools measure it, not test scores or academic achievement, or the ability to memorize facts. Jung studied something far more threatening. He studied the kind of intelligence that perceives what's actually happening beneath what's being presented, the kind that recognizes patterns others are blind to, questions narratives others accept without thinking, and refuses to perform agreement with ideas that don't survive honest examination. And what he found disturbed him, because every society, every institution, every group, no matter how progressive or enlightened it claimed to be, had mechanisms designed specifically to neutralize this kind of intelligence, not by force, by isolation, by pathologizing, by making the intelligent person believe something was wrong with them for seeing what they saw. Today I'm going to show you what Jung discovered about why genuine intelligence terrifies social systems, the specific mechanisms societies use to suppress people who think clearly, what happens psychologically to intelligent people who are punished for their perception, and why understanding this dynamic might be the most important thing you ever learn about yourself. To understand why intelligent people scare society, you first need to understand what Jung meant by intelligence. He wasn't talking about IQ. He wasn't talking about the person who reads the most books or accumulates the most knowledge. Jung observed that the intelligence society fears most is perceptual intelligence, the capacity to see through surfaces to underlying structures, to recognize that the reason given for something isn't the real reason, to perceive that the system claiming to serve people is actually designed to serve itself, to notice that the emperor has no clothes while everyone else is complimenting the fabric. This kind of intelligence is rare, not because few people are born with the capacity for it, but because most people who develop it learn very early that it's dangerous. They learn that seeing clearly gets you punished, that pointing out contradictions makes you a target, that questioning accepted narratives gets you labeled as difficult, negative, or mentally unstable. So, most people with this capacity learn to suppress it. They dull their perception to fit in. They pretend to see what everyone else sees. They perform agreement they don't feel. And over time, many of them forget they ever saw differently at all. But some can't suppress it. Some people's perceptual intelligence is so strong, so persistent, so fundamentally wired into how their consciousness operates that they can't turn it off, no matter how much they try. These are the people Jung was most interested in, because these are the people society works hardest to destroy. Jung identified the first mechanism society uses against intelligent people as consensus enforcement. Every social group operates on shared agreements about reality. These agreements aren't always spoken. Most of them are invisible assumptions that everyone accepts without examining: how success should look, what constitutes a good life, which authorities deserve trust, what questions are acceptable to ask, and which ones make you problematic. Intelligent people threaten consensus because they see the agreements for what they are. Agreements, not truths. They recognize that this is just how things are, is actually, this is how we've all agreed to pretend things are. And that recognition is destabilizing to everyone around them. Because if the intelligent person is right, if these are just agreements rather than objective truths, then everyone else has to face the uncomfortable reality that they've been living inside a construct rather than inside reality. Most people would rather attack the person questioning the construct than question the construct themselves. Jung observed this repeatedly. The intelligent person raises a legitimate observation. Instead of engaging with the observation, the group attacks the person. They're called cynical, negative, arrogant, or out of touch. The content of their perception is never addressed, because addressing it would require the group to examine assumptions they're not ready to examine. So they make the intelligent person the problem instead. This is why intelligent people so often feel like there's something wrong with them. They've spent their entire lives being told, not in words but in reactions, that their perception is the issue. That if they just saw things the way everyone else does, they'd be happier. That their discomfort with accepted narratives is a personal failing rather than an accurate response to genuine contradictions. And many intelligent people internalize this message so deeply that they spend years in therapy trying to fix the very capacity that makes them see clearly. Jung called this the tyranny of the collective, not a political tyranny, a psychological one. The unspoken demand that everyone perceive reality the same way, value the same things, accept the same narratives. And the punishment for deviation isn't imprisonment or violence. It's something more insidious. It's the withdrawal of belonging. The intelligent person is slowly, systematically excluded from the warmth of the group. Not for anything they've done wrong, for what they see that others don't want seen. The second mechanism Jung identified was pathologizing perception. When consensus enforcement fails, when the intelligent person refuses to stop seeing clearly despite social pressure, the system escalates. It reframes their intelligence as illness. The child who questions authority isn't perceptive. They have oppositional defiant disorder. The employee who identifies systemic problems isn't insightful. They're not a team player. The partner who recognizes dysfunction isn't intelligent, they're overthinking. The person who refuses to accept comfortable lies isn't discerning, they're anxious or depressed or paranoid. Jung was particularly disturbed by how the mental health system participated in this pathologizing. He observed patients who had been diagnosed with various disorders, whose actual problem was that they perceived reality more accurately than the people around them. They weren't anxious because of a chemical imbalance. They were anxious because they were seeing genuine threats that everyone else was ignoring. They weren't depressed because something was wrong with their brain. They were depressed because they were living in systems that contradicted everything they could see was true. This doesn't mean all anxiety or depression is just intelligence being suppressed. But Jung recognized that some of what gets labeled as mental illness is actually the psychological cost of seeing clearly in a world that demands blindness. The intelligent person's nervous system is responding accurately to real contradictions, real dysfunction, real danger. But because no one else sees what they see, their accurate response gets labeled as pathology. And here's what makes this mechanism so effective. Once the intelligent person has been pathologized, their perceptions can be dismissed permanently. Everything they see, every pattern they recognize, every contradiction they point out can be attributed to their condition rather than to accurate observation. You're just being anxious. That's your depression talking. You're reading too much into things. The pathology label becomes a permanent filter through which their intelligence is neutralized. They could perceive the most important truth in the room, and it would be dismissed as a symptom. Jung saw this as one of the most sophisticated forms of social control. You don't have to imprison someone who sees clearly. You just have to convince them, and everyone around them, that their clarity is a disease. Then they'll medicate themselves into the same blindness everyone else operates from. And they'll thank you for curing them. The third mechanism is what Jung called the isolation protocol. When intelligent people can't be silenced through consensus pressure or pathologizing, the system isolates them. Not through dramatic exclusion, through subtle disconnection. Conversations get shorter, invitations get fewer, people become polite but distant. The intelligent person finds themselves on the outside of every circle, never explicitly rejected, but never truly included. This works because humans are social creatures. We need belonging like we need oxygen, and the intelligent person is forced into an impossible choice. Suppress your perception and maintain connection, or maintain your perception and lose connection. Most social systems are structured so that you cannot have both. You cannot see clearly and belong comfortably, because your clear seeing makes the people around you uncomfortable, and uncomfortable people don't want you around. Jung observed that this isolation often began in childhood. The intelligent child who asked questions their parents couldn't answer, who pointed out hypocrisy the family didn't want acknowledged, who refused to participate in performances that contradicted what they could see. That child learned through thousands of micro-rejections that their intelligence was the thing separating them from love, not their behavior, not their character, their perception. The very thing that made them who they were was the thing that made belonging impossible. And this creates a wound that most intelligent people carry for life. The belief that if they could just stop seeing so much, stop noticing so much, stop understanding so much, they'd finally be loved, they'd finally belong, they'd finally stop feeling like an alien in every room they enter. But they can't stop seeing. Their perception isn't a choice. It's how their consciousness operates. So, they live in a constant state of grief for the belonging their intelligence costs them. This is where Jung's work becomes crucial, because he recognized that intelligent people weren't just dealing with social difficulty. They were dealing with a fundamental conflict between their authentic nature and the demands of the collective. Their intelligence wasn't optional or adjustable. It was their core operating system. And the collective was demanding they uninstall their operating system to participate. That's not a request for compromise. That's a request for self-annihilation. Jung found that intelligent people who tried to comply, who tried to dull their perception, ignore their insights, perform the blindness everyone demanded, didn't become happier. They became depressed, anxious, physically ill, and profoundly disconnected from themselves. Because suppressing your fundamental way of perceiving reality isn't adjustment. It's psychological violence against yourself. You're not adapting. You're slowly killing the part of you that makes you who you are. And here's what most intelligent people don't realize until they've spent years trying to fit in. The problem was never their intelligence. The problem was the environment's inability to tolerate intelligence. They've been trying to fix themselves when there was nothing broken. They've been trying to become less perceptive when their perception was accurate. They've been apologizing for seeing clearly when clear seeing was the one thing they should have been protecting. If that resonates with you, if you've spent years questioning your own clarity because the world kept telling you it was too much, then you already understand why Jung believed self-knowledge was the foundation of everything. Our guide, True Self-Discovery, offers 24 practical reflection exercises rooted in Jung's teachings, designed not to dull your perception, but to help you trust it, to help you find your way within rather than losing yourself in the world's demand that you see less. Click below to get True Self-Discovery, because once intelligent people stop trying to suppress their perception, they face the real challenge, not fitting in, not being accepted, learning to use their intelligence correctly in a world that wasn't designed for people who see clearly. Jung identified what he called the burden of premature recognition. Intelligent people see where things are heading before others do. They recognize dysfunction in systems before the dysfunction becomes visible. They perceive the trajectory of relationships, organizations, and social movements long before outcomes materialize. And they have to live with this knowledge while everyone around them operates as if the current trajectory is sustainable. This creates a specific kind of suffering that people without this perceptual capacity can't understand. You see, the bridge is structurally unsound while everyone else is driving across it, celebrating how smooth the road is. You recognize the relationship is collapsing while everyone else sees a happy couple. You perceive the institution's decay while everyone else trusts the institution completely. And you can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unknow what you know. You're trapped in awareness while surrounded by people who are comfortable in blindness. Jung observed that many intelligent people tried to warn others about what they perceived, and almost universally, this went badly. Not because their perception was wrong, it was almost always confirmed by later events, but because people don't want to hear about problems they are not ready to face. Warning someone about a danger they can't see doesn't make them grateful. It makes them hostile. You become the source of their discomfort rather than the danger you're pointing to. This is why intelligent people eventually learn to stay quiet. Not because they stop seeing, because they learn that sharing what they see costs more than it helps. They learn to carry their awareness alone, to watch things unfold exactly as they predicted while everyone else acts shocked, to know without speaking, to see without pointing. And while this protects them from social backlash, it creates a profound internal loneliness that never fully goes away. Jung also identified something he called the mirror effect that makes intelligent people particularly threatening. When someone with perceptual intelligence enters a room, they function as an unconscious mirror. Their very presence reflects things people don't want to see about themselves. The intelligent person doesn't even have to say anything. Their way of being, their refusal to perform, their authenticity, their unwillingness to participate in collective pretense, confronts everyone around them with the gap between who they're pretending to be and who they actually are. This is why intelligent people are often disliked without having done anything wrong. People sense that the intelligent person sees through their performance, and being seen through feels like being exposed. It triggers shame, defensiveness, hostility, not because the intelligent person is attacking, but because their perception is piercing through the persona that the other person needs to maintain. The intelligent person's clarity becomes a threat to everyone else's comfortable self-deception. Jung noted that this mirror effect was involuntary. Intelligent people weren't choosing to reflect others' shadows back at them. They were simply existing as themselves. But their authentic existence was enough to destabilize people who were invested in their personas. And rather than doing the uncomfortable work of looking at what the mirror revealed, most people chose to hate the mirror. This is the core of why intelligent people scare society. Not because they're aggressive or confrontational, because their very existence challenges the illusions that society requires to function smoothly. Every system, family systems, corporate systems, political systems, social systems, operates on shared fictions. The fiction that the hierarchy is fair, the fiction that hard work equals success, the fiction that the people in charge know what they're doing, the fiction that everyone's performing for the same good reasons. Intelligent people see through these fictions, and a fiction that's been seen through loses its power, so the system has to either incorporate the intelligent person's perception, which would require restructuring itself around truth rather than comfortable lies, or it has to neutralize the person doing the perceiving. And restructuring around truth is expensive, uncomfortable, and threatening to everyone who benefits from the current fiction. So neutralizing the intelligent person is almost always the cheaper option. Jung saw this play out across every level of social organization. In families, the child who sees clearly is scapegoated as the problem. In workplaces, the employee who identifies real issues is managed out. In relationships, the partner who recognizes dysfunction is told they're the dysfunctional one. In social groups, the person who questions shared assumptions is slowly excluded. The pattern is identical regardless of scale. See too clearly, and the system will find a way to make you pay for your perception. But Jung didn't believe intelligent people were doomed to suffering. He believed they were doomed to a specific kind of suffering only if they kept trying to make unintelligent systems accept their intelligence. The key shift he identified was when the intelligent person stopped seeking validation from systems incapable of providing it. Jung called this the sovereignty of perception. The moment you stop needing others to confirm what you see, the moment you trust your own intelligence even when no one around you agrees, the moment you recognize that being outnumbered doesn't mean being wrong, it often means being early. That's the moment everything changes for the intelligent person. Not because the world becomes easier, because they stop fighting the world and start building a life aligned with their actual perception. This sovereignty doesn't look like arrogance. Genuinely intelligent people who've reached this stage aren't walking around announcing how much smarter they are. They're quiet about their perception. They have learned that broadcasting intelligence in a system designed to suppress it is pointless. Instead, they use their perception silently, choosing relationships with care, navigating systems strategically, building lives that reflect what they actually see rather than what they're supposed to see. Jung observed that sovereign intelligent people developed what he called selective transparency. They didn't show their full perception to everyone. They assessed who could handle truth and who couldn't, and they adjusted accordingly. Not out of dishonesty, out of wisdom. You don't hand a match to someone standing in gasoline, and you don't offer clear perception to someone whose entire identity depends on not seeing clearly. Selective transparency was the intelligent person's way of honoring their perception without being destroyed by sharing it indiscriminately. But perhaps Jung's most important insight about intelligent people was about their role in collective development. He believed that societies need people who see clearly, even though societies punish people who see clearly. Intelligent people function as the consciousness of the collective, the ones who perceive dangers before they arrive, who recognize dysfunction before it collapses, who see truths that will eventually become obvious but aren't yet. Every significant advancement in human understanding came from someone who saw something the collective couldn't see yet. And every one of those people was resisted, ridiculed, or persecuted for their perception before the collective caught up. This is the pattern. Intelligence leads, the collective resists. Eventually, reality forces the collective to see what the intelligent person saw all along, and then the collective pretends it knew all along and finds a new intelligent person to resist. Jung called this the sacrifice of the seer. Intelligent people pay a price for seeing ahead of their time. They pay with loneliness, with misunderstanding, with being labeled as everything from difficult to delusional, and they rarely receive credit when their perceptions prove accurate, because by the time the collective catches up, the intelligent person's early recognition has been forgotten or rewritten as common sense that was obvious all along. If you're an intelligent person who has felt this pattern your entire life, the isolation, the self-doubt, the constant questioning of whether you're seeing too much or too clearly, Jung would tell you this: your perception is not your problem. Your perception is your greatest asset operating in an environment that can't handle it. The solution isn't to see less. The solution is to stop expecting environments that fear clarity to reward you for being clear. Find the people who can match your perception. They exist. They're rare, but they exist. Other intelligent people who see what you see, who understand the isolation of awareness, who don't need you to dull yourself to be comfortable around you. Build your life around those people. Let the rest of the world operate at whatever level of awareness it's comfortable with. You're not responsible for waking anyone up. You're responsible for honoring what you see and building a life that doesn't require you to pretend you're blind. Jung believed that intelligent people who stopped fighting the collective and started building lives around their actual perception experienced a transformation that looked miraculous to outside observers. They went from anxious, depressed, and self-doubting to grounded, clear, and quietly powerful. Not because they changed, because they stopped trying to be something they weren't. They stopped performing blindness. They stopped apologizing for perception. They stopped seeking belonging in systems that could only include them if they amputated their intelligence. The anxiety they'd carried for years wasn't a disorder. It was the friction between their authentic perception and the world's demand that they suppress it. Once they stopped suppressing, the anxiety dissolved. The depression wasn't chemical. It was the grief of living inauthentically. Once they started honoring their intelligence, the depression lifted. The self-doubt wasn't a personality flaw. It was the internalized message of every system that had told them their clarity was the problem. Once they rejected that message, the self-doubt evaporated. This is what Jung meant when he said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you actually are. For intelligent people, becoming who you actually are means accepting that you see what you see, that your perception is accurate even when it's unwelcome, that your intelligence isn't too much, it's exactly what it's supposed to be, and that the world's discomfort with your clarity is the world's problem, not yours. You don't have to fix society's relationship with intelligence. You don't have to educate every person who can't handle clear perception. You don't have to justify your intelligence or prove that what you see is real. You just have to live in alignment with your own perception. Make decisions based on what you actually see rather than what everyone else claims is true. Build relationships with people who welcome your clarity rather than people who punish you for it. Trust yourself, even when trusting yourself means standing alone. That's the real reason intelligent people scare society. Not because they're dangerous, because they're free. Free from the collective illusions that keep everyone else compliant. Free from the shared fictions that make systems feel stable. Free from the performances that most people mistake for reality. And freedom, real freedom, the freedom of seeing clearly and refusing to pretend otherwise, is the most threatening thing any system can encounter. Jung spent his life defending the right of intelligent people to exist as they are, to perceive what they perceive, to refuse participation in collective blindness, to honor their intelligence as the gift it is rather than the burden society tries to make it. And his message to every intelligent person who's been made to feel like their perception is the problem remains as relevant now as it was during his lifetime. You are not too much. You are not seeing things that aren't there. You are not broken for perceiving what others choose to ignore. You are intelligent. And that intelligence, as isolating and painful as it's been, is the most valuable thing about you. Stop trying to give it away. Stop trying to shrink it. Stop trying to make it palatable to people who are threatened by clarity. Your intelligence is yours. Protect it. Trust it. Build your entire life around it. Because a life built on what you actually see, rather than what you're told to see, is the only life that will ever feel like yours. And if you've been walking this path, trusting your own perception, refusing to unsee what you've seen, building something real in a world that rewards performance, our guide, True Self-Discovery, was written for minds like yours. 24 reflection exercises rooted in Jung's teachings, designed to help you go deeper into what you already know is true, to find your way within rather than looking outside yourself for permission to see clearly. Click below to get True Self-Discovery.